The coronation of an Alpha King was where legends were born, and as Seren stood pressed among thousands in the great hall of Valdrin, unlike the nobles who craned their necks to glimpse their new ruler, she simply tried to survive. Every emotion in that crowd crashed into her like waves against a drowning woman. Joy, envy, ambition, lust, fear. She absorbed them all, and her body was failing beneath the weight. No one noticed the servant girl trembling at the edge of the crowd. No one saw her fighting to stay conscious. Then the Alpha King turned to face his people, and his eyes found hers. The force of what lived inside him. The darkness, the hunger, the terrible loneliness, slammed into Seren like a physical blow. Her vision went white, her knees buckled, and she collapsed at his feet. What happened next became the whisper of every court in every kingdom. The newly crowned Alpha King raised one hand. His voice, cold as mountain ice, silenced the chaos with two words. Everyone out. Guards hesitated. Nobles gasped. But no one dared disobey. And when the great hall stood empty, the most powerful man in the realm knelt beside an unconscious servant girl and lifted her into his arms himself. Why would a king who could have anyone care about a nobody? Seren didn't understand either, not until he made his terms clear. He would keep her hidden in the castle. He would protect her from the family that wanted her destroyed. He would give her everything she needed to survive. But there was one condition she must accept. He would never love her. Neither of them understood how impossible that promise would be to keep. The great hall of Valdrin had been built to inspire awe and terror in equal measure. Pillars of black marble rose toward a ceiling painted with scenes of ancient wars. Banners bearing the silver wolf of the royal house hung from every rafter. And today, for the first time in 30 years, the hall held a coronation. Seren should not have been there. Servants were assigned positions. They worked in kitchens, in corridors, in chambers far from noble eyes. They did not stand among the crowd during sacred ceremonies. But Morwen had insisted, her aunt's voice still echoing in Serene's memory from that morning. You will attend the coronation. You will stand where I can see you, and you will remember your place. Her place. Seren almost laughed at the cruelty of it. Her place was wherever her aunt decided to put her, usually somewhere designed to cause maximum suffering. Today, that meant standing in a crowd of 3,000 people, while every emotion they felt poured into Seren like poison into an open wound. She gripped the stone pillar beside her, fighting to stay upright. A woman nearby was weeping with joy, and Seren felt those tears burning behind her own eyes. A lord to her left seethed with jealousy, and her stomach churned with borrowed hatred. A young girl dreamed of catching the king's eye, and Seren's pulse raced with someone else's desperate hope. This was her curse, the thing her aunt called an abomination. The reason she'd been hidden away, beaten down, reminded daily that she was nothing but a burden. Seren could feel what others felt. Not by choice. Not with control. Every emotion within range found its way into her body, her blood, and her bones. Small gatherings were bearable. Crowded markets left her dizzy for hours. But this, 3,000 souls packed into a single hall, all of them fixated on the same moment. This was drowning in sensation. Focus, she whispered to herself. Just survive this, and it is over. A horn sounded. The crowd's attention shifted as one, and Seren gasped as the collective spike of anticipation hit her chest like a fist. Her vision blurred. She blinked rapidly, trying to clear it. The doors at the far end of the hall opened. He walked in alone. Alpha King Kale of Valdrin moved through his own coronation as if he were already bored with it. He was tall, taller than any man Seren had ever seen, with dark hair that fell in waves past his jaw and eyes the color of a frozen lake. Gray and cold and utterly unreadable, the crowd's emotions shifted again. Awe flooded through Seren. Desire. Fear. So much fear. The people loved their new king, but they were terrified of him too. Why? Seren could feel the usual emanations from the crowd, but from him, from the king walking slowly toward the throne, she felt nothing. It was like staring at a void where a person should be, an absence so complete it made her skin prickle. He ascended the steps to the throne. The high priest waited with the crown, ancient silver set with stones black as midnight. The ceremony words began, but Seren couldn't hear them over the roaring in her ears. Something was wrong. The closer the king got to that throne, the stronger the emptiness became. It wasn't an absence, she realized with growing horror. It was a barrier. Something massive lurked behind it, contained, controlled, barely restrained. The crown touched his head. Rise, Alpha King Kale, ruler of Valdrin, lord of the northern Pax, master of the silver throne. He rose. He turned to face his people, and his eyes found Seren. For one heartbeat there was nothing. Just those ice-gray eyes locked onto hers across the vast distance of the hall. Seren couldn't move, couldn't look away. Then the barrier inside him cracked. What poured through that crack was unlike anything Seren had ever absorbed. Darkness so profound it swallowed light. Hunger that had been starving for years. Rage coiled so tight it could have leveled cities. And beneath all of it, buried so deep she almost missed it. A loneliness so devastating it made her want to weep. The force of it slammed into her chest. Seren's body seized. Her legs gave out. The last thing she saw before the darkness took her was the king's expression changing, shock cracking through that perfect mask. As she crumpled to the stone floor at his feet, chaos erupted. Voices screamed. Bodies surged. Guards shouted orders. Through the haze of unconsciousness, Seren heard fragments. She's dead. Someone fetch a healer. Get back, all of you. Then one voice cut through everything else. Cold, commanding, absolute. Everyone out. Silence. Your Majesty, someone stammered. The ceremony. The blessing. The lords have not yet. I said everyone out. Now. The words carried power beyond volume. Alpha authority rippled through the hall, and Seren felt the crowd's terror spike before bodies began moving, shuffling, fleeing. Footsteps echoed, then faded. Doors groaned and slammed. Silence fell. Seren floated in darkness, too weak to surface, but aware enough to feel hands sliding beneath her shoulders and knees. Large hands, ice-cold hands. She was lifted as if she weighed nothing, cradled against a chest that radiated frost despite the summer heat. The Alpha King had dismissed his entire coronation, and he was carrying her out himself. Seren woke to silk and softness and utter confusion. The ceiling above her was painted with constellations, silver stars on deep blue, more beautiful than anything she'd seen in her 22 years of existence. The bed beneath her was impossibly soft, layered with furs and cushions that smelled of lavender. Sunlight streamed through tall windows hung with gossamer curtains. This was not the servants' quarters. Seren sat up too quickly. Her head spun. The memories crashed back in fragments. The coronation, the crowd, the king's eyes finding hers, the darkness that had exploded from behind his barriers. You're awake. The voice came from the shadows near the door. Seren's heart lurched as a figure stepped into the light. It was him, the Alpha King, still wearing his coronation clothes, though the crown was gone. His dark hair was disheveled now, as if he'd run his hands through it repeatedly, and those gray eyes watched her with an intensity that made her want to shrink into the mattress. Seren scrambled to her knees, head bowed, trembling. Your Majesty, forgive me. I never meant to. I don't know what happened. Stop. She fell silent instantly. Footsteps approached. Slow. Measured. Seren kept her eyes fixed on the silk sheets, watching his shadow grow larger as he drew closer. He stopped at the edge of the bed, close enough that she could feel the chill radiating from his body. "Look at me." It was not a request. Seren raised her head, meeting his gaze with every ounce of courage she possessed. He studied her face for a long moment. "You collapsed at my feet during my coronation. You caused a spectacle that will be whispered about for decades. Lords and ladies alike watched me dismiss the entire ceremony and carry an unconscious servant girl from the hall." His head tilted slightly. "I would very much like to know why." Seren's throat went dry. I don't know how to explain, Your Majesty." "Try." She swallowed hard. This was the moment where she would be thrown into a dungeon, or executed, or sent back to Morwen with a punishment so severe she wouldn't survive it. But lying to an Alpha King was death, and perhaps some part of her was simply too tired to keep hiding. "I feel things," Seren whispered. "Emotions. Other people's emotions. They enter me. I absorb them whether I want to or not." She gripped the sheets, bracing for his disgust. The crowd was too large. 3,000 people, all of them feeling so intensely. "And then you—" She stopped. His eyes narrowed. "And then, I what?" Seren's voice dropped to barely a breath. "You were different. Empty. Like a fortress with nothing behind it. But when you looked at me, something cracked. What came through was—" She couldn't finish. Couldn't find words for the devastation she'd experienced. What came through was what? His voice was dangerously soft now. "Everything," Seren breathed. "Darkness, hunger, rage, and loneliness. So much loneliness it nearly stopped my heart." The king went utterly still. For a long, terrible moment, Seren was certain she'd made a fatal mistake. "You didn't tell the most powerful man in the realm that you'd seen inside his soul. You didn't speak of his private darkness aloud, but instead of anger, something else flickered across his face, something that might have been wonder." "You felt that," he said slowly. "You truly felt it." "Yes, Your Majesty." "And you survived." Seren blinked. Yes?" The king turned away, walking toward the window. He stood there for a long moment, silhouetted against the afternoon light, his hands clasped behind his back. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. Still controlled, but there was something beneath it now. "I have a condition," he said quietly. "A curse, some would call it. I feel nothing. No joy, no sorrow, no connection to another living soul. My emotions exist, but they are locked away where even I cannot reach them." He paused. "Where no one can reach them. Those who try, healers, witches, would-be mates, they experience what you experienced. Most do not wake up." Seren's blood ran cold. "Most? You are the first in 7 years to open your eyes again." She didn't know what to say. The king turned to face her, and she saw something other than cold indifference flicker across his expression. Curiosity. Maybe even hope, though it was buried so deep she could barely detect it. "What is your name?" he asked. "Seren, Your Majesty. Seren Vaith." "Vaith." His brow furrowed. "The disgraced house. The traitors." Seren flinched. "My uncle committed those crimes. Not me. I was a child when— I know the history." He waved a hand dismissively. "Your uncle Aldrich conspired against my father. Your house was stripped of lands and titles, and you became— what? A servant?" "My Aunt Morwen took me in. She reminds me daily that I should be grateful." Something flickered in his eyes. Understanding, perhaps, or recognition of a familiar kind of cruelty. "I have a proposition for you, Seren Vaith." The king's voice was formal now, deliberate. "You will remain in this castle. You will be given chambers, servants, protection. The court will be told you are a healer companion to the crown, someone with rare gifts useful to the royal household. No one will question your presence and no one will harm you here. Seren's heart pounded. In exchange for what? Your presence. He paused, seeming to choose his next words carefully. When I am near you, the barrier thins. I felt something during the coronation. Briefly. For the first time in 7 years, I felt something that wasn't emptiness. His jaw tightened. I don't know why you survived what others couldn't. I don't know why my curse responds to you. But I intend to find out. Hope flickered in Serene's chest before she could stop it. Safety. Protection. Escape from Morwen. But she knew better than to trust hope. And if I refuse? She asked quietly. Then you return to your aunt. I will not force you to stay. His gaze held hers. But I should warn you. She's already sent word demanding your return. Apparently, you've embarrassed her greatly. Seren's stomach dropped. Morwen would destroy her for this. The public collapse. The king's attention. Every perceived humiliation would be repaid tenfold in bruises and blood. I'll stay, Seren said quickly. I'll stay, Your Majesty. The king nodded once. Then we have an agreement. But there is one thing you must understand. He took a step closer, and the chill of him washed over her like winter wind. I am not offering love. I am not offering partnership. I am offering an arrangement, nothing more. Whatever connection allows you to survive my curse, I will use it. But you must never expect anything beyond that. His gray eyes bored into hers. I will never love you, Seren. I am incapable of it. Do you understand? The words should have hurt. Instead, they felt almost like relief. No expectations, no pretense. Just honesty, cold as it was. I understand, Your Majesty. Good. He turned toward the door. Rest tonight. Tomorrow, your new life begins. He was almost at the threshold when Seren spoke again, the question escaping before she could stop it. Your Majesty? The loneliness I felt from you. If you feel nothing, how can you be lonely? He stopped. For a long moment, he didn't turn around. That, he said quietly, is the cruelest part of the curse. I cannot feel the emotions, but I am aware they exist, trapped, screaming to be felt. His voice dropped to something barely audible. Imagine being locked inside yourself forever, watching your own heart beat behind glass you cannot break. Then he was gone. Serene sat alone in the beautiful room, wrapped in silk and silence, and wondered what she had agreed to. 3 days passed before Seren understood the shape of her new cage. It was a beautiful cage. She couldn't deny that. Her chambers occupied an entire wing of the eastern tower, with rooms for sleeping, bathing, reading, and receiving guests she would never have. The servants assigned to her were kind and efficient, though they looked at her with barely concealed curiosity. The mysterious healer companion the king had carried from his own coronation. No one told her what to do. No one struck her for speaking out of turn. No one reminded her that she was worthless, unwanted, a stain on a noble house. The silence where Morwen's cruelty should have been was almost disorienting. On the 3rd morning, a messenger arrived with word that the king wished to see her. Seren dressed carefully in one of the simple gowns that had appeared in her wardrobe and followed the guard through corridors that still felt like a dream. The king's study was smaller than she'd expected. Books lined every wall, stacked in precarious towers, their spines cracked from use. Maps covered the desk, weighed down by stones and daggers. And standing by the window, exactly as he had been when she'd first woken, was King Kale. Sit, he said without turning. Seren sat in the chair across from his desk, folding her hands in her lap to hide their trembling. I've been conducting research, Kale said, still gazing out the window. Trying to understand what you are. Empaths are rare but not unheard of. Most can shield themselves from overwhelming input. You clearly cannot. No, Your Majesty. I never learned how. He turned at that, You were never trained? My aunt considered it an abomination. She forbade me from speaking of it, let alone developing it. Something cold passed through his eyes. Your aunt sounds like a remarkably unpleasant woman. Before Seren could respond, the study doors burst open. Where is she? Seren's blood turned to ice. That voice. She knew that voice better than her own heartbeat. Morwen Vaith swept into the study like a storm wrapped in silk and malice. She was tall, sharp-featured, with hair the color of iron and eyes that had haunted Seren's nightmares for 16 years. Behind her trailed Seren's cousin Brielle, beautiful and nervous, shooting Seren a look that might have been apologetic. Ah. Morwen's gaze landed on Seren, and her lip curled. There you are. Do you have any idea what you've done? The humiliation you've brought upon our house? Seren opened her mouth, but no sound came out. 16 years of conditioning had stolen her voice in Morwen's presence. Lady Vaith. The king's voice cut through the room like a blade. You were not summoned. Morwen turned to face him, and Seren watched her aunt's expression shift from fury to something almost resembling respect. Almost. Your Majesty. Morwen dropped into a curtsy that managed to be both proper and condescending. Forgive the intrusion, but surely you understand that I must reclaim what belongs to me. The girl is under my guardianship. Whatever incident occurred at your coronation, I assure you it will be properly addressed. Properly addressed? The king repeated flatly. And what would that entail? Morwen smiled. It was not a kind smile. Discipline, Your Majesty. The child has always been troubled, willful, prone to outbursts and attention-seeking behavior. I've dedicated 16 years to correcting these flaws, but clearly more work is needed. Seren felt the words like blows, even though Morwen hadn't moved. Troubled, willful, flawed. The familiar shame coiled in her stomach, thick and suffocating. Interesting. The king circled his desk slowly, his gaze never leaving Morwen. And the marks on her back? The scars I noticed when my healers examined her? Those are part of your correction methods? Morwen's smile faltered for just a fraction of a second. Children require firm guidance, Your Majesty. I'm sure you understand. What I understand, the king said, his voice dropping to something dangerously soft, is that you've spent 16 years brutalizing a child whose only crime was being born with a gift she couldn't control. What I understand is that you came into my home uninvited and demanded the return of a woman who is now under my protection. He stopped directly in front of Morwen, and even from across the room, Seren felt the temperature drop. What I understand, Lady Vaith, is that you've mistaken my patience for permission. Morwen took an involuntary step back. Your Majesty, I meant no disrespect, but the girl belongs to House Vaith. She is my responsibility, my burden to bear. You cannot simply... I am the Alpha King. Each word fell like a hammer blow. I can do whatever I wish. And what I wish is for you to leave my castle, return to whatever hole you crawled from, and never speak to or of Seren Vaith again. Color drained from Morwen's face. You can't. She is mine now. The words reverberated through the study. Seren felt them in her bones, alpha authority wrapping around the declaration like chains forged in fire. Morwen's mouth opened and closed. For the first time in Seren's life, her aunt had no words. But the defeat in her eyes lasted only a moment before something else replaced it. Something calculating. Dangerous. Very well, Your Majesty. Morwen's voice was silk over poison. Keep her, if you wish. But you should know what you're keeping. She turned to look at Seren, and her smile returned, sharper than before. Did she tell you what she did? Did she confess the real reason House Vaith was destroyed? Aunt Morwen, please. Brielle stepped forward, her face pale. Quiet, child. Morwen didn't look away from Seren. The king deserves to know. It wasn't just my brother Aldrich who betrayed the crown. His niece, this trembling creature you've claimed as yours. She was present the night your father nearly died. Her gift was exploited to help the assassins. Seren felt the ground tilt beneath her. That's not true. I was 7 years old. I didn't understand. You were there. Morwen's voice cracked like a whip. You told them where the guards were stationed. You sensed the layout of the palace and reported it like a good little spy. Silence fell. Seren's lungs seized. Couldn't look at the king, couldn't bear to see the disgust that must be spreading across his face. But when she finally forced herself to raise her eyes, his expression held no disgust, only cold, thoughtful calculation. Lady Vaith, he said quietly, I am aware of the events surrounding my father's assassination attempt. I've studied every detail of that night since I was old enough to read. The palace wards were breached using empathic magic. Yes. But the magical signature left behind belonged to an adult. A fully trained empath. He paused, his gaze cutting to Morwen with razor precision. A 7-year-old child may have been tricked into providing information, but she did not breach those wards herself. Someone else did. Morwen went white. But thank you for the information. The king's smile held no warmth whatsoever. Guards, escort Lady Vaith from the premises, and begin an investigation into her whereabouts on the night of the assassination attempt 16 years ago. What? No. Morwen lunged forward, then stopped as 2 guards seized her arms. You can't do this. I've served this kingdom loyally. The girl is lying. She's poisoned you against me. I've said nothing, Seren whispered, still frozen in her chair. Exactly. The king's eyes met hers briefly before returning to Morwen. You condemned yourself with your own words. Take her. Morwen's screams echoed through the corridors as the guards dragged her away. Brielle stood rooted to the spot, tears streaming down her face, looking between Seren and the empty doorway where her mother had disappeared. Cousin. Seren rose on shaking legs. Brielle, I'm sorry. I never meant for... Don't. Brielle's voice cracked. Just... don't. She fled from the study without looking back, the door slamming behind her. Seren stood alone with the king, her mind reeling. You defended me, she said finally, even before you knew the full truth. Why? The king returned to his desk, shuffling papers as if nothing significant had occurred. Because she was lying. I could see it in the way she held herself, the way her story shifted with every word. He glanced up. And because I have no tolerance for those who abuse the helpless. Something warm unfurled in Seren's chest. Gratitude, hope, feelings she barely recognized anymore. Your Majesty. Kale. She blinked. What? When we're alone, you may call me Kale. He didn't look up from his papers. Titles grow tiresome. Seren stared at him for a long moment. This cold, impossible man who had just dismantled her abuser with a handful of words. Thank you, she whispered. Kale. He nodded once, still not meeting her eyes, but she caught a flicker of something crossing his features. Something that looked almost like the beginning of warmth. But outside the study, Seren knew the danger wasn't over. Morwen would talk. She would tell everyone who would listen what Seren supposedly was. A weapon, a pawn in a conspiracy, the girl who had unknowingly helped assassins reach a king. And somewhere in this castle, Brielle now hated her. The safety she'd been promised suddenly felt very fragile indeed. 2 weeks after Morwen's arrest, Seren learned what it meant to be displayed. The harvest feast, Kale had explained in his study that morning, not looking up from his documents. An annual tradition. The nobility gather, alliances are reinforced, and I spend 4 hours wishing I could feel boredom so I'd have something to focus on. Seren had almost smiled at that. Almost. You want me to attend? I want you beside me. Now he did look up, those frost-gray eyes unreadable as ever. The court has been whispering since the coronation. They need to see that you're not a prisoner, not a curiosity. You're under my protection. Under his protection. The words sent warmth spreading through her chest, even though she knew she shouldn't let them. Now, standing at the entrance to the great hall in a gown of deep emerald silk, Seren felt that warmth curdling into terror. The hall was transformed. Candles blazed from every surface. Long tables groaned under platters of roasted meats and autumn vegetables. And everywhere, nobles turned to stare at her with eyes full of curiosity, contempt, and hunger for scandal. Breathe. Kale's voice was low, meant only for her. His hand pressed against the small of her back, and even through layers of fabric she felt the frost of him. But somehow, that chill had become grounding rather than frightening. "I'm trying," she whispered back. "You survived my coronation. This is merely a dinner party. A dinner party where everyone wants to see me fail, then disappoint them." Before she could respond, a herald announced them. His Royal Majesty, Alpha King Kale of Valdren, and the Lady Seren Vaith, healer companion to the crown. They descended the steps together. Seren kept her chin high, her expression neutral, even as waves of emotion crashed against her from every direction. Suspicion, resentment, jealousy, lust. That one made her stomach turn, coming from a bloated lord who watched her with piggish eyes. She filtered it as best she could, letting the feelings flow through rather than taking root. One of the techniques she'd been secretly teaching herself in the quiet hours. They reached the high table and Kale pulled out her chair himself. A murmur rippled through the hall. Kings did not seat their companions. Kings barely acknowledged them in public. "Thank you," Seren murmured as she sat. "Don't thank me yet." His voice was barely audible. "Lord Gavrin is approaching, and he's insufferable even without an agenda." True enough, a silver-haired man with a pointed beard was already making his way toward the high table, his smile too wide to be genuine. "Your Majesty." Lord Gavrin swept into a bow. What a magnificent feast, and what a fascinating choice of companion. His eyes slid to Seren, assessing her like livestock. "The Vaith girl. I knew your uncle, you know. Before his unfortunate treason." Seren's hands clenched in her lap. "I was 7 when my uncle died, my lord. I barely knew him myself." Of course. Of course." Gavrin's smile never wavered. "Still, one wonders if certain tendencies run in families. Treachery. Manipulation." He leaned closer, lowering his voice conspiratorially. "Strange powers that shouldn't exist in proper wolves." The hall had gone quiet. Everyone was listening. "Lord Gavrin," Kale's voice cut through the tension like a frozen blade. "Are you suggesting that my judgment is flawed?" Gavrin's smile flickered. "Not at all, Your Majesty. I merely..." "Because if I've chosen to place Lady Seren under my protection, and you're questioning that choice, you're questioning me." The king rose slowly from his seat. The temperature in the hall dropped noticeably. "And if you're questioning me, perhaps you'd like to do so formally, in the challenge ring." All color drained from Gavrin's face. "Your Majesty, I meant no..." Then apologized to Lady Seren. "Now, on your knees." The silence was absolute. 300 nobles watched as Lord Gavrin, one of the wealthiest men in the kingdom, slowly lowered himself to his knees before a disgraced house's only surviving daughter. "I apologize," he said through gritted teeth. "Lady Seren, for any offense." "Louder," Kale commanded. "I apologize. Sincerely and completely." "Accepted." Seren was amazed her voice remained steady. "Please rise, Lord Gavrin." The man scrambled to his feet and retreated into the crowd, humiliation burning in his eyes. Around the hall, nobles quickly found other things to look at, other conversations to have. Kale sat back down as if nothing had happened. That was excessive, Seren whispered, though she couldn't stop the warmth spreading through her chest. That was necessary. He picked up his wine goblet. They needed to understand the cost of disrespecting you. And what is the cost? His gray eyes met hers, and for just a moment she thought she saw something flicker in their depths. More than any of them can afford. The feast continued. Seren ate without tasting, spoke when spoken to, and smiled until her face ached. But throughout it all, she was acutely aware of the man beside her, the frost that radiated from his skin, the careful control in every movement, the way his gaze would drift to her face when he thought she wasn't looking. Near midnight, when the dancing had begun and the wine flowed freely, Cale leaned close. "You've done well tonight." "I've survived," she corrected quietly. "That's not the same thing. For people like us, surviving is doing well." His breath was cool against her ear. "You should be proud." People like us. The words echoed in Seren's mind long after the feast ended, long after she'd returned to her chambers and dismissed her servants. People like us. As if they were the same. As if they belonged together. She pressed her hand against her chest, feeling her pulse race, and recognized with sudden, terrifying clarity what was happening. She was falling for him. The frozen king who couldn't love, the broken man trapped inside himself, the alpha who had knelt a lord before her and called her worth more than any of them could afford. "Stop," she whispered to herself. "Stop this now." But even as the words left her lips, she knew it was already too late. The weeks that followed the harvest feast established a new pattern to Seren's days. Mornings were spent with tutors Cale had arranged, historians to teach her court politics, scholars to help her understand and control her gift. Afternoons brought walks in the castle gardens, meals in her chambers, and quiet hours of reading in the library. But evenings belonged to the king. It had started simply. He'd summon her to his study under the pretense of discussing her progress, her health, her comfort. But the discussions would stretch into hours, wandering from practical matters to philosophy, history, the nature of power and duty. Seren discovered that beneath his frozen exterior, Cale possessed a mind that burned with curiosity and a dry wit that surfaced unexpectedly. "You're smiling," he observed one evening, looking up from a treaty he was reviewing. "You made a joke. It was amusing. I don't make jokes. You compared Lord Gavrin to a peacock with digestive troubles. That's a joke." Something shifted in his expression. Not quite a smile. She'd never seen him truly smile. But a softening around the eyes that made her pulse stutter. Perhaps it was. I wouldn't know. Humor requires emotional response. "And yet you said it to make me laugh." "I said it because it was accurate." But he held her gaze a moment too long before returning to his treaty. These were the moments Seren hoarded like treasures, small glimpses of the man buried beneath the curse, fragments of warmth fighting through the ice. One night, 3 months after the coronation, everything changed. A storm had descended on Valdrin, the kind that turned the sky black and sent wolves howling in their sleep. Thunder shook the castle walls. Lightning illuminated the world in stark white flashes, and Seren, who had absorbed terror from the servants all evening, couldn't stop trembling. She was pacing her chambers when the knock came. "Enter," she called, expecting a maid with tea. Instead, Cale stepped through the doorway, still dressed in his formal clothes from the council meeting. His dark hair was damp at the temples. His expression was uncertain. She'd never seen him uncertain before. "The storm," he said by way of explanation. I wondered if you were—" He stopped, jaw tightening. "I don't know why I came." Seren should have reassured him, should have smiled and said she was fine, sent him on his way. Instead, she heard herself say, "I'm glad you did." The words hung between them. Slowly, Kale closed the door behind him. He crossed the room to where she stood by the rain-lashed window, stopping close enough that she could feel his winter-cold presence. "You're shaking," he observed quietly. "The servants fear. There are too many of them, all terrified of the storm. I can't filter it all out. Is there anything that helps?" Seren hesitated. This was dangerous territory. She knew that. But the storm still raged outside, and the fear still clawed at her insides. And he was looking at her with something that might have been concern. "Touch," she admitted. "When someone touches me, it creates a barrier. Their physical presence grounds me, makes it easier to separate their emotions from everyone else's." "Show me." Her heart stopped. "What?" "Show me." He extended his hand, palm up. "If it will help." Seren stared at his offered hand. This was the Alpha King, the man who felt nothing, the frozen heart of Valdren. She placed her trembling fingers against his palm. The cold of him was immediate, shocking, like plunging her hand into a winter stream. But beneath the chill, she felt something else. The barrier inside him, the one that contained all his trapped emotions, it didn't just thin. It trembled. Kale's breath caught. "What is that?" His voice was strained. "What are you doing?" "Nothing. I'm not doing anything. I feel you." The words came out rough, almost broken. "Inside the walls. I can feel you there." Seren tried to pull away, but his fingers closed around hers, holding her in place. "Don't." His eyes met hers, and for the first time, they weren't empty. They were desperate. "Please, don't stop." So she didn't. They stood there as the storm raged, hands intertwined, while something extraordinary happened. The barriers inside him didn't break, but they became translucent. Seren could sense the emotions trapped behind them more clearly than ever before. Not just darkness this time, not just hunger and rage and loneliness. Joy, wonder, tenderness, hope. All of it reaching toward her like flowers straining toward sunlight. "You're not empty," she whispered, tears burning her eyes. "You've never been empty. Everything is still there, Kale. Everything you thought you'd lost." His free hand came up to cup her face. His palm was cold against her cheek, but she leaned into it anyway, craving the contact. "What are you?" he breathed. "What are you doing to me?" "I don't know. I don't understand it either. I should send you away." His thumb traced her cheekbone. "For your own safety. For my sanity." "But you won't." "No." His forehead dropped to rest against hers. "I won't." The kiss, when it came, was inevitable. His lips were cool but soft, moving against hers with a tenderness that made her soul ache. Seren had never been kissed before, had never wanted to be. But this felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. Her hands found his chest, feeling his heart pound beneath her palms. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her closer until no space remained between them. The chill of his body met the warmth of hers, and instead of discomfort, there was rightness. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kale's eyes had changed. There was color in them now. The faintest hint of blue beneath the gray, like dawn breaking over a frozen lake. "This is dangerous," he said hoarsely. "I know. I told you I couldn't love you. I know. I'm beginning to think I was wrong." Seren's heart soared even as terror gripped her. Because she could feel what was happening inside him now, could sense the barriers cracking wider, the emotions surging against their prison. And beneath it all, something darker stirred. Something that felt ancient and hungry and wrong. "Kale," she whispered. "There's something else in there. Something that isn't you." His expression flickered. Shut down. The barriers slammed back into place so fast it left her gasping. "You should go to bed," he said, stepping away. His voice was controlled again, empty again. The storm is passing. Wait, what was that? What did I feel? Nothing. He was already at the door. You felt nothing. Forget this happened, Seren. For both our sakes. He was gone before she could respond. But Seren stood alone in her chambers, pulse racing, lips still tingling from his kiss, and knew with absolute certainty that she couldn't forget. And she couldn't stop. She was in love with him. Whatever darkness lived inside him, whatever secrets he was hiding, it didn't matter. She loved him anyway. And that terrified her more than any storm ever could. After the night of the storm, everything changed, and nothing changed. Kale continued to summon her each evening. They continued their long conversations, their shared silences, and their careful dance around the thing that had passed between them. But now there were other things too. Touches that lingered too long. Glances that held too much meaning. Moments when he would reach for her hand as if he couldn't help himself, then pull away with a frustrated sound. And always, always, the cold. Seren had noticed it from the beginning, the unnatural chill that radiated from his skin. But now she began to notice other things. How he sometimes stood by the fire for hours, trying to absorb warmth that never came. How his lips would turn faintly blue during council meetings. How his hands trembled when he thought no one was watching. "You're getting worse," she said one evening, 4 months after the coronation. "Whatever this is, it's progressing." They were in his private chambers, a liberty that would have scandalized the court if anyone knew. The fire blazed high, but Kale still wore a heavy cloak, his fingers wrapped around a goblet of mulled wine he wasn't drinking. "I don't know what you're referring to," he said flatly. "The cold. You're freezing all the time and it's getting worse. Don't lie to me, Kale. I can feel the effort it takes you to hide it." Something flickered across his face. Pain, maybe. Or exhaustion. "It's nothing you need to concern yourself with. You're my—" She stopped, unsure how to finish that sentence. "My king? My protector? My love? You matter to me. Of course I'm concerned." Kale set down his goblet. For a long moment he stared into the fire, shadows dancing across his beautiful, frost-touched features. "There's a story," he said finally, "about my grandfather. About the curse that made him the most powerful Alpha King in history." Seren went very still. What story? He was dying. Weak. The kingdom was falling to enemies on every border. In desperation, he sought out a witch, a dark one, who offered him power beyond measure. But the price... Kale's jaw tightened. The price was his heart. Not literally, not physically, but emotionally. The witch locked away his ability to feel, to love, to connect. She said it would make him strong, undefeatable. She was right. But she lied about the rest. His voice dropped. She said the curse would die with him. Instead, it passed to his son. And to his son after that. And to me. Seren moved closer, settling on the floor beside his chair like she'd done so many times before. "The barrier inside you, the one that traps your emotions. Yes, every king of my line has carried it. Every king has lived without love, without joy, without true connection to another soul." His hand found her hair, fingers threading through the strands absently. "Until you." Her chest clenched. "I don't understand what I do. Why I'm different. Neither do I. But when you touch me, the barrier's thin. When you kiss me..." He trailed off, his hand stilling. "For those few moments I feel everything. Years of trapped emotion all at once. It's overwhelming, addictive, and terrifying." "Why terrifying?" He didn't answer. "Kale, why terrifying?" His eyes met hers, and she saw the truth there before he spoke it. "Because the curse has a safeguard," he said quietly. "If a king ever truly loves, If the barriers ever fully break, the power that was given returns to its source. But it doesn't go quietly. It tears itself free, taking the king with it. He paused. If I let myself love you completely, Seren, I die. The words hit her like physical blows. No. She was shaking her head before he finished. No, that can't be right. There must be a way to break it, to... There isn't. My father spent his entire reign searching. His father before him. The witch who cast the curse died long ago, and her identity was deliberately erased from all records. There is no cure. Then we stop. Seren pulled away from him, even though it felt like tearing off her own skin. We end this now. You stay behind your barriers, and I'll leave. I'll go somewhere far away where I can't tempt you to. Seren. I won't be the reason you die. Seren. His hands caught her face, tilting it up to meet his gaze. It's too late. The world stopped. What? She breathed. I love you. The words fell from his lips like stones into still water. I've loved you since the moment you woke up and looked at me like I was a person instead of a monster. I've loved you through every conversation, every touch, and every moment of these past months. I tried to stop it. I tried to maintain the barriers. But you... His thumbs brushed tears from her cheeks she hadn't realized she was shedding. You are unstoppable. Don't say that. She was sobbing now. Please don't say that. I love you, Seren Vaith. With every trapped, tortured emotion in my frozen heart. I love... He stopped. His eyes went wide. His hands fell from her face as both arms wrapped around his chest, clutching at something she couldn't see. Kale? Terror clawed up her throat. Kale, what's happening? He doubled over with a sound she'd never heard before. Half gasp, half scream. His skin, already pale, went translucent. Through it, she could see something dark spreading from the center of his chest, tendrils of shadow reaching outward like cracks in ice. No. Seren grabbed his shoulders. No, 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 you can't. Help! Someone help! Kale collapsed to the floor, convulsing. The shadows spread faster now, climbing up his throat, darkening the veins beneath his skin. His eyes met hers, and in them she saw everything, every emotion he'd ever hidden, every feeling he'd ever suppressed, all of it flooding out as the barriers inside him shattered completely. Love, so much love, for her, only for her. And beneath it, ancient and terrible and vast, the darkness that had been sleeping for 3 generations. Run! He gasped. Seren, run! The darkness exploded outward. Seren was thrown across the room, slamming into the wall hard enough to steal her breath. When her vision cleared, she saw Kale lying motionless on the floor, shadows writhing beneath his skin, frost spreading across the stones around him. Guards burst through the door. Servants screamed, healers were summoned, but Seren couldn't move, couldn't do anything but stare at the man she loved as the curse that had plagued his bloodline for 3 generations finally claimed its price. He'd told her the truth. If he let himself love her completely, he would die, and she'd let him love her anyway. 3 days. 3 days of sitting beside Kale's frozen body while shadows writhed beneath his skin. 3 days of healers coming and going, shaking their heads, whispering words like unprecedented and beyond our skill. 3 days of watching the man she loved slip further and further away. Seren hadn't slept, hadn't eaten more than a few bites forced upon her by worried servants. She simply sat in the chair beside his bed, holding his ice-cold hand, and refused to let go. You can't die, she whispered to him for the 100th time. I won't allow it. Do you hear me, Kale? I won't allow it. He didn't respond. He hadn't responded since the collapse. His chest still rose and fell, barely, but his skin had turned the color of winter moonlight, and the shadows beneath it pulsed with their own terrible rhythm. The door opened behind her. Lady Seren. The voice belonged to Thornwell, Kale's oldest advisor. "There's someone who wishes to speak with you. She claims to have information about the curse." Seren didn't turn. "Who?" A pause. "Your cousin, Brielle Vaith." For a long moment Seren didn't move. Brielle, who had fled in tears when Morwen was arrested. Brielle, who had looked at her with such betrayal, such hatred. "Send her in." Footsteps approached. Seren finally turned to see Brielle standing in the doorway, pale and thin, her eyes red-rimmed from crying. She looked nothing like the beautiful, confident girl Seren remembered. "Cousin." Brielle's voice cracked. "I know you have no reason to trust me, after everything my mother did, everything I believed about you. But I found something. In my mother's private papers. I've spent weeks searching through her belongings since the arrest." She held out a leather journal, her hands trembling. "Something you need to see." Seren took the journal slowly. The leather was old, cracked with age, and the pages inside were covered in handwriting she didn't recognize. "What is this?" "Our family history. The real history." Brielle moved closer, her voice dropping. "The witch who cursed King Kale's bloodline 3 generations ago. Her name was Verity Vaith. She was our great-great-grandmother." The world tilted. "What?" "The Vaith family wasn't always disgraced. We were once powerful, connected to the crown. But Verity was obsessed with the royal family. She believed they'd wronged her somehow, stolen something precious, so she cursed them." Brielle pointed to a passage in the journal. "She deliberately erased her identity from all official records afterward, but she kept private notes. It's all here. The ritual she used, the price she paid, and the key to undoing it." Seren's hands shook as she read the faded words. "The curse binds emotion to shadow, heart to ice. Only blood of my blood can break what I have made, but the price is steep. The breaker must take the darkness into themselves, must become the vessel for all the pain the cursed kings could never feel. If they survive, the curse ends. If they fail..." The words blurred as tears filled Serene's eyes. "I'm the key," she whispered. "My empathic gift. It comes from her. From Verity. That's why I can affect Kale's barriers. That's why I survived touching his curse when others died." "Yes." Brielle's voice was barely audible. "And that's why my mother tried so hard to keep you weak. To keep you away from the royal family. She knew if you ever got close to a king, if you ever made him feel, the curse would activate," Seren finished. "And I'd be the only one who could break it." She looked at Kale's still form, at the shadows crawling beneath his translucent skin, and felt something shift inside her. All her life, she'd been told her gift was an abomination, a curse, a stain on her family's honor. But it wasn't any of those things. It was the key to saving him. "I have to tell you something first," Seren said quietly, turning back to Brielle. "Before I do this, something I never told anyone." Brielle watched her warily. Seren moved to sit on the edge of Kale's bed, taking his cold hand. "The night of the assassination attempt on Kale's father, I was there. Morwen brought me. She said we were visiting the palace, that she wanted to show me something beautiful. I was 7 years old and I was so excited to see the castle." Tears streamed down her face. "She used me. My gift. She pressed my hands against the palace wards and told me to feel what was inside. And I did. I felt everything. Every guard, every servant, every noble. I told her where they all were. I didn't understand what I was doing. I didn't know she was giving that information to the assassins." She choked on a sob. "My sensing helped them plan the attack. I was a tool, and I never knew." Brielle's face crumpled with shared grief. "Seren, you were a child. You couldn't have known. But I still carry that guilt. And now I know. Verity's blood, our blood, it was designed to destroy this family. First through the curse, then through me. She looked at Kale's motionless face. But I'm going to use it to save them instead. She lifted his frozen hand to her lips, pressing a kiss against his knuckles. I'll take the darkness into myself, just like Verity's journal says. And if it kills me, at least you'll live. Seren, wait. Brielle grabbed her arm. The journal says the breaker must survive for the curse to end. If you die, the darkness just returns to him. You have to be strong enough to contain it. Then I'll be strong enough. How can you know that? Seren looked at her cousin, at this girl who had hated her for years and was now trying to save her life. Because I have something Verity never had, she said quietly. I have something worth living for. She turned back to Kale, placed both hands on his chest, and opened herself completely. The darkness was vast. Seren had thought she understood what lived inside Kale. She'd felt glimpses of it. The loneliness, the hunger, the rage. But those had been drops of water compared to the ocean that now crashed against her consciousness. 3 generations of trapped emotion. 3 kings who had lived and died without ever feeling love, joy, connection. All of that unexpressed pain compressed and fermented into something monstrous. And beneath it all, older and colder than anything else, the original curse itself, Verity's hatred given form. It poured into Seren like ice water filling her lungs. She screamed, or tried to. Her body convulsed, back arching off the bed where she'd collapsed beside Kale. Distantly, she heard Brielle shouting, heard guards rushing in, heard chaos erupting around her. But the darkness demanded her attention. You think you can contain me? The voice was ancient, feminine, cruel. Verity's echo, still living in the curse she'd created. You are nothing. A broken girl playing at power. You will shatter. And when you do, I will consume you both. Seren felt herself cracking. The darkness was too much, too vast, too hungry. It pressed against the boundaries of her mind, seeking weaknesses, finding them. Every insult Morwen had ever hurled at her. Every blow she'd ever received. Every moment she'd believed herself worthless, broken, wrong. The darkness found them all and used them as doorways. You are nothing, Verity's voice hissed. You have always been nothing. Why do you think your own family despised you? Why do you think no one wanted you? You are a vessel for other people's pain, nothing more. You have no self, no worth. No. No. The word came from somewhere deep inside Seren, somewhere the darkness hadn't reached yet. You're wrong. Am I? Then tell me, little empath. What are you worth? What have you ever accomplished? What have you ever been except a burden to everyone who knew you? Seren's mind raced through her memories. The beatings, the isolation, the years of being told she was worthless. But then other memories surfaced. Kale's hand extending toward hers during the storm. Kale's voice, cold but gentle, calling her by name. Kale's eyes, filled with wonder, when she told him his emotions were still there. Kale's lips against hers, desperate and tender and real. I am the woman he loves, Seren said, and her voice grew stronger with each word. I am the one who makes him feel. I am the key to breaking your curse, Verity. And I am stronger than you ever were. Impossible. You are. I am Seren Vaith. I carry your blood, but I am not your heir. I feel what others feel, but I am not empty. I have absorbed pain my entire life, and I am still standing. She pushed back against the darkness with everything she had. You poured your hatred into this curse because you couldn't bear to feel it yourself, but I can bear it. I can bear it all. Because unlike you, I know what love is. And love is stronger than hate. The darkness screamed. Seren screamed with it. And then, impossibly, the darkness began to break. Not shatter, not explode, but break, like ice cracking in spring, like dawn breaking over a frozen lake. Light poured through the cracks, warm and golden, and Seren realized it was coming from her. From her heart. From the love she felt for the man lying beside her. The curse fought back. Verity's echo thrashed and clawed and raged. But each attack met the same resistance: warmth, light, love. Each assault broke against the truth Seren had discovered in these past months. She was worthy. She was wanted. She was loved. And nothing, not even 3 generations of darkness, could take that away. With a final desperate surge, Seren pulled the last of the curse into herself. She felt it settle into her bones, her blood, and her soul. But instead of poisoning her, it transformed. The darkness met the light inside her and became something new. Something that was neither curse nor gift, but both, woven together, balanced. The shadows stopped writhing, the cold receded, and Kale's eyes opened. "Seren?" His voice was hoarse, cracked from disuse. But it held warmth. Something she'd never heard from him before. "I'm here." She collapsed against his chest, sobbing, laughing, and unable to contain the emotions flooding through her. "I'm here. You're alive. We're both alive." His arms wrapped around her, and they were warm too. Warm, and strong, and real. "How?" He breathed into her hair. "The curse. I felt it killing me. I broke it." She pulled back to look at his face, at the color returning to his cheeks, at the blue that had fully emerged in his gray eyes. "I took it into myself and broke it. But the darkness is part of me now? But it's not dark anymore, it's just power, emotion. Everything your family suppressed for 3 generations, finally allowed to exist." She touched his face, marveling at the warmth of his skin. "You can feel everything now, Kale. Truly feel it." His eyes filled with tears. For a long moment he simply stared at her as emotions cascaded across his face. Joy, relief, grief, wonder, love. So much love. A lifetime of love, finally allowed to exist. "I love you," he said, and the words didn't trigger catastrophe, didn't summon shadows or ice or death. They simply hung in the air between them, beautiful and true. "I love you, Seren Vaith. I love you with everything I am." "I love you too." She kissed him, and his lips were warm, his arms were warm, his heart beat strong and steady against her chest. "I love you too." The weeks that followed rewrote the history of Valdrin. Morwen's trial revealed everything: her knowledge of the curse, her attempt to use young Seren to scout the palace for assassins, her years of abuse designed to suppress Seren's power. She was sentenced to life imprisonment, stripped of all titles and lands. Brielle was pardoned for her mother's crimes. More than that, she was given a place in the Queen's household. A cousin reconciled, a family rebuilt from the ashes of betrayal. The curse's breaking didn't just affect Kale. Throughout the kingdom, members of the royal bloodline reported strange sensations: warmth where there had been cold, emotions where there had been emptiness. The poison that had spread through 3 generations was finally cleansed, and in the castle of Valdrin, a wedding was planned. Not a political arrangement, not a contract built on necessity, a true wedding, born of love. Seren stood before the mirror in her chambers, dressed in silver and white, flowers woven through her hair. Behind her, Brielle fastened the final buttons of her gown. "Nervous?" her cousin asked. "Terrified," Seren admitted, "but the good kind." "Is there a good kind of terrified?" "There is when you're about to marry the man you love, the man who can finally love you back." A knock at the door. A guard's voice announcing it was time. Seren walked through the castle corridors one last time as a single woman. The same corridors she'd stumbled through after fainting at a coronation. the same walls that had witnessed her transformation from a broken servant girl to a queen. The great hall was filled with nobles and commoners alike, but Seren only saw one person. Kale stood at the altar, dressed in black and silver, his dark hair falling past his jaw, his blue-gray eyes fixed on her with an intensity that made her pulse race. And when she reached him, when she placed her hands in his warm ones, she felt everything he felt. Joy, wonder, gratitude, desire, love, so much love. "I told you once that I could never love you," he said quietly, for her ears alone. "I was wrong. I loved you from the moment I carried you from my coronation. I just didn't have the words for it. And now?" she whispered. "Now I have all the words." He lifted her hands to his lips, kissing her knuckles one by one. "I love you. I choose you. I will spend every day of my life proving that you are worth more than any crown, any kingdom, and any power in this world." The priest began the ceremony. Vows were exchanged. Rings were placed on fingers. And when Kale finally kissed his bride, when the great hall erupted in cheers, when the sun broke through the clouds and filled the space with golden light, Seren felt something she'd never felt before. Not borrowed emotion, not absorbed feeling, not someone else's joy reflected in her own heart, her own happiness, pure and true and entirely her own. She had walked into this castle as a servant girl with nothing but pain and secrets. She was walking out as a queen, with a husband who adored her, a family that had chosen her, and a future bright with possibility. The curse was broken. The darkness was transformed. And love, real, impossible, magnificent love, had won.